In this latest video from Square One Law, I'm joined by JP Funsale, who is the specialist partner at the firm on employment law. JP, this must be one of the busiest times you've had in your career.
Graham, hi there. Yes, it has been tremendously busy, distressing for a number of businesses and a number of clients, but tremendously interesting and fascinating at the same time.
Well, in this short conversation, I want to talk to you about the massive issue of the furlough program, because the way businesses now react to this emergency, the COVID-19 emergency, will determine their future when we come out of the emergency. Just put it into context, how the furlough program works and how people should consider using it.
The context, I think, is important. So, we were at maximum saturation point as far as employment's concerned. Talent's difficult to find. People want to hang on to their good people. And then with very little warning, businesses find themselves in dire commercial and financial straits. Fortunately, the Chancellor announced this job retention scheme, which effectively allows employers to place employees on furlough, which is a new concept in UK employment law, which effectively means a period of paid absence from the business. Agreement is required, and employees can retain their employment, and it avoids the need for employers to consider making people redundant.
Now, employers that have gone through the furlough scheme, and they are many and numerous, will quite often not have furloughing in their regular employment contracts with staff. So how do you get around that and make sure that it is agreed?
That's right, Graham. So as you say, agreement's required. I think there is this shared sense of purpose. And in my experience over the last week and a half, I haven't had yet an employee object to the notion of a furlough. I think those affected understand that it's a shared endeavour. I think they understand that cash is tight and that drastic steps need to be taken to protect not just jobs, but also businesses and the viability of those. And so employees are generally receptive to being placed on furlough. Usually that means receiving 80% of their current pay. There are very few examples I can think of where employers have elected to top that up, bearing in mind cash is tight at the moment. But it secures employment. It means continuity of services, and it means that all other terms and conditions of employment are preserved.
Now, there is a minimum period for a furlough. You can switch it on and off, but you can't switch it on and off and make someone effectively part-time.
Yeah, so I'd rather hope for more flexibility, but there's a balance, and I think the government need to balance the scheme being exploited and the difficulties of the scheme being overly administratively burdensome and providing employers with cash. And so the minimum furlough period is 3 weeks, which I guess means that in practice one could furlough a member of staff for 3 weeks, and you could then rotate them back on. Alternatively, you could leave them furloughed for the duration of the scheme, which is 3 months from the 1st of March, so expiring currently at the end of May.
Let me give you an example from my own work and see if other people might pick up on this, on the 3-week case. I have a member of staff who works in the accounts department. She generates invoices in the first week of the month and invoices on the last day of the month. So effectively, there are 3 weeks of the month that she doesn't have to work. Now, would it be permissible for somebody like that to be furloughed for 3 weeks?
Yeah, perfect. And then bring that member of staff back for the last week of the month when you're generating and sending out your invoices. And I guess they could also do a bit of debtor control.
Debt chasing, yeah. Okay, so that's the intention of the 3-week rule. It's so that somebody who genuinely isn't needed and would be twiddling their thumbs in the office or in the business could be furloughed for a short period of time.
Yeah.
On the 3-week rule, is there a minimum amount they have to be back in the business before they can be re-furloughed?
No. Current guidance suggests not. So your proposal to have a member of staff back, for a week or even just a couple of days should be sufficient.
Okay, I use that by way of example to explain it. Now, there are some exemptions to furloughing. If somebody's off sick or on maternity, can you explain those?
Yeah, so a member of staff currently away from work due to sickness, ill health, injury, would need to bring that period of absence to an end prior to being furloughed. Similarly, maternity leave, a member of staff away from the office on maternity or paternity leave or adoption leave would have to give notice of his or her intention to bring that to an end. Employees who are off shielding, so self-isolating in order to prevent the spread of the coronavirus, can though be furloughed.
Let's talk about this issue of agreement. You talked about it at the very beginning, and the fact that many contracts are not sufficiently robust to have furloughing. Do you think that when this period comes to an end, there'll be a necessity for employers across the board to revisit their employment contracts and put furloughing in? Because it does seem to be a very attractive tool for both employers and employees to avoid serious economic disruption to households and businesses.
Yeah, so in the past, one would often see layoff provisions or entitlements to work short time, particularly the manufacturing sector. There's fewer of those provisions about now because those contracts simply aren't very popular. Furloughing, I think, really only applies because the Chancellor has given it life. And I don't necessarily expect to see these provisions continuing beyond the COVID-19 virus. However, I think there is a risk where large numbers of staff are being furloughed, because technically that would fall within the scope of the duty to consult collectively. So employers, I think, need to think very carefully about issuing their HR1 forms. They need to think very carefully about consulting with their collectively recognized bargaining agents. And certainly they need to have some proof of having placed employees on furlough. So it needs to be reduced to writing. And ideally what one should have is either a signed letter or at least an email acknowledging receipt and understanding.
Okay, now there are lots of other elements to this. One last question before we go into the conclusion, and that is, there are some people who may want to not furlough, but may want statutory redundancy. Now, as you said, that's few and far between because most employees want to keep their jobs. But that statutory redundancy at this moment in the economy would be very expensive for companies. So presumably, companies have to watch out for the request for statutory redundancy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that needs to be approached very sensitively. Firstly, it's contrary to the spirit of the job retention scheme. But as you say, it's also a strain on cash in the short term. Redundancies are never a mechanism to save cash in the short term. However, I think there is sufficient flexibility in the job retention scheme to allow employers to consult during the course of a furlough, and for employees also to serve out part of their notice whilst on furlough. So again, in terms of apportioning a cost saving to the company, the furlough scheme might be useful from that perspective too.
Last question, JP. There may be people watching this who don't know you. They may be running SME businesses or smaller businesses. It's clear that you know your stuff. There will be maybe some reluctance to phone somebody like you because of worry over cost of a consultation. What are you able to say to reassure people that they can phone you and not worry about big bills?
Graham, we set the business up 8 years ago with the wish to develop relationships. We've grown, I think, successfully during the last 8 years because we've managed to develop those relationships. And, we do that, I think, by being interested in our clients' businesses, by trying to offer them solutions. These are unprecedented times. If there are folks who are genuinely having concerns and they don't know, they have questions about implementation, they don't know which options they should follow, then, by all means, please do give us a call. There are a number of us in the employment team and in the broader business, commercial lawyers, corporate lawyers, who have the capacity and the experience to provide assistance during the next couple of weeks.
Thank you very much, JP.